Hello and welcome to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and I'm excited to be joined once again by my co-host and friend, Zen Garcia, for our continuing study of the Book of Genesis and related readings from various other books. Zen, are you there, sir?
I am, brother. Good to be here with you again and the listening audience. Looking forward to continued discourse on all of this that we're bringing forth.
Yeah, same here. How's your week been going?
Really good. Finding just too much information to add to this new book, and so just trying to complete all that. And how about yourself?
Yeah, real good. Jake Grant had come down here. He got here on Monday. He's leaving tomorrow morning, so he's still here this evening. But we've had a very productive couple of days, so we're looking forward. We got a game plan for the next, for the remainder of the year, and if we're able to follow that game plan, then and we're successful with it, then hopefully he can move down here come January. So.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, very excited about it. Yeah, it's been a very, very good week.
Yeah, very cool. I can imagine that you two together will get a lot of work done.
Yeah, I think so.
A lot of stuff, yeah.
And he brought the cool weather down with him.
Oh, yeah, right on.
It was like in the hundreds before he got here, and like today was 88 degrees, and I'm like, dude, you brought all the cool weather down with you.
Nice. Well, that's a plus.
Yeah, definitely. It was a nice break from the heat, especially since they won't let us go to the pool because of all this COVID stuff. So,
oh my gosh,
nice break. Yeah, it's like, okay, they won't let us go. The pool's locked down because this whole COVID thing, and they're afraid that there's going to be liability. It's like, well, first of all, who can prove it? How can you prove? Oh, I got COVID at the pool.
Right.
It's not like it comes with a label on you, infected in the pool.
Right. So crazy.
Ridiculous. But, so, man, I'm excited to jump in. I think we can probably cover a fair amount of ground this evening. My thought was we already did a recap on Genesis 6, so I'm thinking I can read Genesis 7 and 8, and I know you've got some stuff you want to read that goes along with that. And if we have time later in the broadcast, I'd like to read Jasher 6, because it's certainly an elaborated version of all of this.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Yeah.
Have you seen The Chosen yet?
I've started watching it, but only seen probably 1 or 2 episodes of it.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, episode 3. You're going to like episode 3. Episode 3 is really, I'm not going to ruin it for you, but it's really, really good. But we just finished it this evening. Wow.
Nice. How many episodes?
8. They had 8 episodes for season 1. COVID's kind of put a bit of a hold, it sounds like, on season 2, but they're trying to jump through hoops to try to meet whatever requirements so they can get started on it. But I think they're having trouble finding locations that will allow them to do it at the moment. But man, I tell you, they are doing it right. They really are. I mean, I don't agree with everything that they're doing, and some of the casting is a little bit questionable in my mind. I had different people or different ideas of what people look like in my head for some of them. Yeah. But the guy that plays Yeshua, Jesus, he is awesome, and it just gets better and better. I think I could probably shed a tear at every single episode.
Wow, that's awesome.
That I've seen, and I think they did like an amazing job of capturing his humanity. Like most movies, they always do a good job of showing his divinity, but the reality of them having to, make camp, because they were wandering around, right? And having to start a fire by rubbing sticks together, and here's the creator of the universe having to rub sticks together to create a fire. They really did an amazing job of, and makes you fall in love with him all the more when you see him for his humanity. You respect his divinity, I guess. Yeah. It's kind of interesting how that works out, but I'm real excited for them. And they've provided the perfect proof of concept for how to do it. The way that I want to do Seed is exactly the way they did The Chosen, crowdfunded and the whole deal. So real excited for them. I watched the first 4 when they first came out, and then there was a long break, and we just watched the last 4 yesterday and today. So I want to go back and watch all 8 of them in a row, kind of binge watch on the weekend. bring a lot of tissue paper.
Yeah, that's what I need to do too. Is just binge watch all of them.
Yeah, I think you'll really benefit from doing it that way for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I like doing it that way too. If I'm gonna, be into something.
Yeah, people are in the chat room asking what it's called, The Chosen, and I believe the website is thechosen.tv, so you can check it out. Thechosen.tv, really good. All right, let me see. I got Genesis 7 ready to go. So,
all right,
let's jump in here. Genesis 7 from the King James Bible. And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by sevens, the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of the earth. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according unto all that the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him into the ark because of the waters of the flood. Of clean beasts and of beasts that are not clean, and of fowls and of every thing that creepeth upon the earth, there went in 2 and 2 unto Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 7th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. In the selfsame day entered Noah, and Shem, and Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them into the ark. They and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. And they went in unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And they that went in male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. And the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was lifted above the earth. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl, and of cattle, and of beasts, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man. So much for the local flood idea.
Right.
And then all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land died, and every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and the creeping things, and the fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth. And Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. That's the end of chapter 7. I'll go ahead and do chapter 8 also.
All right.
And God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark, and God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. The fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained, and the waters returned from off the earth continually. And after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. The ark rested in the 7th month, on the 7th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat, and the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. And he sent forth a raven, which went forth to and fro until the waters were dried up from off the earth. Also he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot, and she returned unto him into the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. Then he put forth his hand and took her and pulled her in unto him into the ark. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came in to him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. And he stayed yet other 7 days, and went forth and sent forth the dove, which returned not again unto him any more. And it came to pass in the 600th year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, was the earth dried. And God spake unto Noah, saying, Go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. Bring forth every living thing that is with thee, of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. And Noah went forth, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, and whatsoever creepeth upon the earth after their kinds, went forth out of the ark. And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled the sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more every living thing as I have done. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease.
Excellent. All right, I'll read the Targum version first, since it's so close to as far as the King James account, and then we can share some of these others. And the Lord said to Noah, Enter thou and every one of thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of all clean cattle, take thou 7 by 7, male and female, and of all cattle not clean 2 and 2, male and female. But of birds of the heaven, 7 by 7, male and female, to preserve from them seed upon the earth. For behold, I give you space of 7 days. If they will be converted, it shall be forgiven them. But if they will not be converted, after a time of days, yet 7, I will cause rain to come down upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and will destroy all bodies of man and of beast upon the earth. And Noah did according to all that the Lord had commanded him. And Noah was the son of 600 years when the deluge of waters was upon the earth. And Noah entered with his sons and his wife and wives of his sons with him into the ark from before the waters of the deluge. Of all cattle clean and of cattle unclean, of birds and of whatever creepeth upon the earth, 2 and 2 they entered unto Noah into the ark, male and female, as the Lord had instructed Noah. And it was at the time of 7 days after the conclusion of the mourning for Methuselah that the Lord beheld, and lo, the sons of men had not turned, and the waters of the deluge came down hotly from heavens upon the earth. In the 600th year of the life of Noah, in the 2nd month, which was the month of Marshavan, for hitherto the months had been numbered from Tishri, which was the beginning of the year at the completion of the world. In the 17th day of the month, in that day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the giants were gathered there together with their sons, and perturbed them, and afterwards the windows of heaven were opened. Jerusalem, and the windows of heaven were opened. And the rain came down upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. In that same day entered Noah and Shem and Sham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and the wife of Noah, and the 3 wives of his sons with him into the ark, they and every animal after his kind, and all cattle after their kind, and every reptile that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after its kind, every bird which flieth. And they entered to Noah into the ark 2 and 2 of all flesh, in which was the breath of life. And they coming entered male and female of all flesh unto him, as the Lord had instructed him. And the word of the Lord covered over the door of the ark upon the face thereof. And there was a flood 40 days upon the earth, and the waters were multiplied and bare up the ark, And it was lifted from the earth, and the waters waxed mighty and increased greatly upon the earth. And the ark went floating upon the face of the waters, and the waters prevailed greatly upon the earth, and all the high hills which were under the heavens were covered. 15 cubits higher did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered, and all flesh expired which moveth upon the earth, of fowl and of cattle and of wild beasts, and every moving thing that moveth upon the earth, and all the sons of men, everything in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all on dry land died, and all the bodies of men and beasts upon the face of the earth, from man to cattle to creeping thing and to the fowl, which wingeth in the air of heaven, perished from the earth. And Noah only was left, and they who were with him in the ark, and the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. Chapter 8. And the Lord in his word remembered Noah, and all the animals and the cattle which were with him in the ark, and the Lord caused the wind of mercies to pass over the earth, and the waters were dried. Jerusalem. And he remembered in his mercies the good which was with Noah, and the Lord caused the wind of mercies. And the fountains of the deep were shut up, and the windows of heaven, and the rain was forbidden to descend from heaven, and the waters returned from being on the earth, going and returning. And the waters were minished at the end of 150 days. And the ark rested in the 7th month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Quadron. The name of the one mountain is Cordinia, and the name of the other mountain Armenia. And there was builded the city of Armenia in the land of the east. And the waters went and diminished until the 10th month, the month of Tammuz. In Tammuz, in the first of the month, the heads of the mountains were seen. And it was at the end of 40 days, and Noah opened the aperture of the ark which he had made. And he sent out a raven, and it went forth, going forth and returning, until the waters had dried from the earth. And he sent forth a house dove from being with him, to see whether the waters were lightened from off the face of the earth. And the dove found no rest for the sole of the foot, and returned unto him to the ark. And he knew that the waters were yet upon the face of all the earth. And he reached out his hand, and took and brought her unto him into the ark, and waited yet 7 days. Jerusalem, and he began to number. And again he sent the dove from the ark, and the dove came to him at the evening time, and behold, a leaf of olive gathered, broken off, she brought in her mouth, and which she had taken from the mount of Meshisha. And Noah understood that the waters had lightened from being on the earth, and he prolonged yet 7 days, and added to send forth the dove, but she added not to return to him again. And it was in the 651st year in Tishri, in the first of the month, in the beginning of the year, that the waters were dried from upon the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark, and saw the faces of the ground to be dried. And in the month of Marshavan, in the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. And the Lord spake with Noah, saying, Go forth from the ark, thou and thy wife and thy sons and the wives of thy sons with thee, every living animal that is with thee of all flesh, of fowl, of cattle, and of every reptile that creepeth on the earth, bring forth with thee, that they may produce in the earth, and spread abroad, and multiply on the earth. And Noah went forth, and his sons, and his wives, and the wives of his sons with him. Every animal, every reptile, and every bird, which moveth upon the earth according to its seed, went forth from the ark. And Noah builded the altar before the Lord, that altar which Adam had builded in the first time when he was cast forth from the Garden of Eden, and had offered an oblation upon it. And upon it had Cain and Abel offered their oblations. But when the waters of the deluge descended, it was destroyed. And Noah rebuilded it. And he took of all clean cattle, and all clean fowl, and sacrificed four upon that altar. And the Lord accepted his oblation with favor. And the Lord said in his word, I will not add again to curse the earth on account of the sin of the children of men. For the imagination of the heart of man is evil from his youth. Neither will I add to destroy whatever liveth, as I have done. until all the days of the earth, sowing in the season of Tishri, and harvest in the season of Nisan, and coldness in the season of Tebeth, and warmth in the season of Tammuz, and summer and winter and days and nights shall not fail Jerusalem, until all the days of the earth from now, sowing and reaping and cold and heat, and days and nights shall not cease. End of the Targum reading.
So when you're saying Jerusalem, that's a differentiation between the Jerusalem Targum and
yes, and the Palestinian.
So they're just giving slight
alternate reading, slight alternate. Yeah. And usually it's only a couple of verses or passages that are different.
Yeah, that's kind of similar. I was talking with Jake earlier today about the Charles translation, where Charles, and it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that in the Charles, when you see a dual reading side by side, he's comparing the Greek with the Ethiopic. Is that right? Or
I do believe so. But I'm not real familiar with the Greek Book of Enoch.
I think that's what it was. I again, I'd have to go back and look at it.
Yeah, I know that there's the Geese.
Maybe
Ethiopic.
Geese.
That is the Ethiopic.
Oh, that is the Ethiopic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it was the Ethiopic that is complete, and other ones are in fragment.
Right.
But where the fragments are, there are some similarities. I mean, it doesn't deviate too much. I mean, there'd be slightly different wording.
Right.
But, I guess he just felt like, well, I'll just put both of them there.
Yeah, might as well.
Jake did the dramatized version of Enoch, which, by the way, we're going to be working together. I had this idea. I'm still planning on releasing Charles with you reading all of Charles. I got to sit down and edit that, and then myself reading all of Lawrence, so releasing 2 different videos with the complete reading of Enoch from both translations by you and I.
Oh, that'll be cool.
Then I want to re-release our Quest for Truth episodes that we're doing, taking out all of our banter that has nothing to do with the topic.
Actual readings, yeah.
And the commercial breaks, and just doing a straight edit, but using his dramatized version for the reading. So
that would be cool.
Yeah, so it'd be like, and I'm going to do them like chapter by chapter, except for when there's really short chapters, maybe do 2 or 3 chapters or something, but make short, segmented videos. So it'll start off like Enoch chapter 1 with Jake's rendition of the Book of Enoch from Charles. And then we segue from that into our discussion, minus all the commercials and other side trails. So it'll be a cleaner version of our show on that, I think, that I'll probably upload to the Quest for Truth webpage that I had with Doug Hamp under the Genesis and Enoch section. So we're going to do Enoch first, see how that goes. And he was questioning that because when he's doing the dramatized reading, he's like, well, I can't do both, because that just messes up the flow of the drama. So, he just picked one and went with. I'm like, yeah. I mean, I don't remember them deviating too much.
Yeah, no.
So that'd be about the same between the Jerusalem and the what was the Palestinian?
Yeah, and the Targum, yeah, the Aramaic and the Palestinian. Yeah, the Jerusalem is the Aramaic. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I always found it interesting that he changed the start of the year. So like flood world that it started I guess in Tishri, right?
Yeah, that's what it says, and that's interesting because that's the way it is in Israel even now. Rosh Hashanah is the first of Tishri, Yom Teruah, but we know that in Exodus that it was changed to Abib Nisan. That was the beginning of the year, which it's interesting to me that in the Book of Enoch, that is also that Nisan is the beginning of the year.
Really?
Yeah, it begins with the vernal equinox. When the sun is between the 3rd and 4th gate of heaven, which is when the hours of night and day are equal 12, being the vernal equinox. That's the beginning of the year, and then the summer begins with the summer solstice when the sun reaches the Tropic of Cancer, and then reversing course when it reaches again the equinox for the autumnal equinox. That's the beginning of fall.
Oh.
And then when it reaches the Tropic of Capricorn for the winter solstice, that's the beginning of winter.
So that's interesting, because we're looking at the pre-flood world from the biblical perspective, and it's saying that the head of the year was Tishri, yet Enoch's we presumably a pre-flood text, and it's still saying that it's for the month of Passover. So would that be a prophetic statement, or why? I mean, where would be the discrepancy? I mean, how would you reconcile that? I guess is better. Well, we're going to break. We got about 4 seconds or so before we go to break. Maybe you can think about that during the break and talk about it back.
Yeah, I'll think about it.
The seeker of lost paradise may seem a fool to those who have never sought the other worlds. Christ told us in Revelation to remember from whence thou art fallen, and do the first works. What many people don't realize about the fall of humanity is that Adam and Eve were initially bright-natured, and that they were placed into the garden of God to dress and tend it, and that being deceived and tempted and eating from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that in that moment that you touch thereof you shall die, that they come under the authority of death in those moments, and since their fall have been banished from the place of the immortals. This concept becomes very clear in the work of the forgotten Edenic books of Adam and Eve. And as we study and read into this material, this knowledge will come to light, and it will help you to understand that being restored to our bright nature, our first estate through Christ, that the reason he had to take on embodiment and enter into mortal flesh form was in order to not only redeem the ancestors of Adam, the children of light, but also to rectify us and to restore us to our first estate in this manner, defeating death and bringing forth salvation with the promise of the cross.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Everyday questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and I'm joined with Zen Garcia. We're discussing the Book of Genesis, and right before the break, we're discussing how the Book of Enoch apparently describes the head of the year as being the same as like Nisan, the beginning of the Hebrew calendar today, the way it is now, the month of Passover. But biblically speaking, in the pre-flood world, it was saying that at that time the head of the year was Tishri in the 7th month. So both of these giving an account of the pre-flood world, how would you reconcile that?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and what I had thought about is something that I found in the legends of the patriarchs and the prophets, and it speaks about how Adam and Eve were banished from paradise on the 1st of Tishri, which was Yom Teruah, and also that the coming of Christ, speculation that perhaps he had come in first Advent, and without a doubt in second Advent, it says that he would return on Yom Teruah, the day that no man knoweth, the day or the hour, and that when the 7th trump is blown, that would be on Yom Teruah, and that would be when the kingdoms of this world become the kingdoms of our Lord. And so that may be why at the beginning, because Adam was cast out on Yom Teruah, that would be the beginning of the year. And it would make sense that being exiled on that day, and that being the first day he was here on the earth, that the year would begin with that day, and that he would recognize that as Rosh Hashanah until the times were changed.
That is interesting because, the Jews recognize what the Torah says, obviously, about the head of the year being Nisan. But yet they do Rosh Hashanah, head of the year, in Tishri. As you often hear it as the secular New Year's versus the biblical New Year's, and of course we have January 1st. And I had read that there was a belief that Adam was created on Feast of Trumpets, Tishri 1, and so that's interesting if that's true that they were banished from Eden also on Tishri 1. That's rather interesting. And I believe that Yeshua was born. The second Adam was definitely born, in my opinion, on Feast of Trumpets, according to the Revelation 12, 1 through 5.
That's what I believe as well, yes.
Which on our Gregorian calendar, when you track it back, was September 11th, 3 BC, which is really fascinating if you download the free software Stellarium. And the Stellarium reckons 3 BC as -2 in the software. Something about no year zero or something. I always get my head kind of twisted around when I think about that. But anyway, they reckon 3 BC as -2. And so if you use the software to back up to -2, and I actually go back to around August 28th, I believe. And I described this at quite some length in my book, Babylon Rising. The dance of the stars that takes place at that time, and you can watch it. You can step it forward slowly or fast, or watch it however speed you want to on Stellarium. But it's quite impressive what happens in the alignment where you have Leo, the king constellation, and I think it's Rigel, the king star, and Jupiter, the king planet. So you have the three kings on top of each other at one point, and I forget exactly how it all comes, but it's like Mercury, who's reckoned as the messenger of the gods, comes through this alignment, and then and Venus sits on top of her king for a while, and then everything moves in such that you end up with the alignment of the stars above her head, Virgo, and the
moon, crown of 12 stars. Yeah.
And when you see that alignment, when you actually see it play out, the moon that is at her feet is a crescent new moon. So,
nice, yeah.
I'm like, what else do you do with Revelation 12? I mean, if you read Revelation 12, 1 through 5, the only thing that fits in my mind anyway is the birth of Yeshua. And if that's the sign in the heaven, then that exact sign, and it happens for, I believe it's 80 minutes.
Wow.
11th, 2 BC, 3 BC, -2 in the software, which I imagine may have been the period of labor, that she may have been in labor for 80 minutes and delivered. That's just speculation on my part. Now, there's other people, sort of the dominant view I run into a lot in the so-called Hebrew roots movement is that they believe he was born on tabernacles. And they give their reason for that, and but most of it's anecdotal, and they'll use see, he tabernacled among us. But the problem is, he couldn't have tabernacled among us if he was born at the beginning of Sukkot. If he was born at the beginning of the Feast of Tabernacles, then the Torah says that when the woman gives birth to a male, she has to stay sequestered away in her quote unquote uncleanness,
right?
For 7 days.
Yeah, 7 days. Yeah.
And so that's
circumcised on the
8th day. So he wouldn't have been able to tabernacle among us. He would, and that's part of the bonding, with the baby, with the child and the mother. That there's a different time period if there's a daughter born, but so in that time in her quote unquote, and that's not unclean as in sin or anything like that. It's just
right.
Ritually, I guess you might say, unclean through the birthing process and whatnot.
Right.
So she has to be cleansed with the baby for 7 days. So and the other problem is that all males are commanded to be in Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles. So Passover, Pentecost, and Sukkot, Tabernacles, you have to be in Jerusalem. That's not a good way for the Son of God to show up,
right.
violating everything in Bethlehem. So to me, I mean, you have the Revelation 12, 1-5 sign that's a slam dunk home run, in my opinion. And then you have, so he's 7 days with Mary, doing their thing in Bethlehem. 8th day circumcised, then 10th day is Yom Kippur, day of.
Yes.
Then a few days later, he could have easily, with no problem, been tabernacling among us.
Right.
He'd still tabernacle among us even if he was born on trumpets. I just think there's way too many. Plus, that's the time when kings are coronated. And they would sound, of course, the ritual of the Feast of Trumpets is just like it sounds, blow the trumpets, right? So there's
the shofar.
So they're blowing the shofars, and that's the time when kings are coronated. So the King of Kings shows up. His birthday is the day that kings are coronated, and
yes,
for the sound of men blowing trumpets and celebrating, and angels.
Angels, yes.
Same. So I just think it's a much more epic birth.
Absolutely.
And for me, a much more biblically supported birth that's also lines up that you can watch the thing happen on Stellarium if you want to go check it out. So, yeah, I'm very much of the opinion that he was born. And so if the first Adam was born on Tishri 1 and the second Adam was born on Tishri 1, and as you said, he's coming back on Tishri 1.
Yes.
That's what I tell people that are still hung up on the Christmas thing. I'm like, look, there's nothing wrong with celebrating the birth of our Savior. Let's just do it on the day he was actually born.
Right.
Because he's coming back on his birthday.
Yes.
So it's a good time to start practicing, and it's not December 25th.
Right.
Miss the party. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually, I'll share with you the passage that is connected. This is from the Legends of the Patriarchs and the Prophets. It says, "Now it was the first day of the 7th month Tishri, the day on which at the close of the world's history the Lord will come to judge the quick and the dead, that the Lord God remembered Sarah and the promise he had made, and looked upon her, and she conceived a son in her old age, 1 year and 4 months after her sojourn in Gerar, and 9 months after, say some, but say others 6 months and 2 days after, at midday, say some others, in the evening of the 15th of Nisan. Or as others affirm, on the 1st of Nisan she was delivered of a son, without suffering any pains in the bringing forth. And the same time the Sarah's womb was blessed. God looked upon many other barren women and blessed them also. And on the day that the child was born, they were delivered likewise. And the blind saw, the dumb spake, the deaf heard, and the lame walked, and the crazed recovered their senses. Also the sun shone 48 times brighter than he shines at midsummer, even with the splendor that he had on the day of his creation." And so here it's saying that, again, on the 1st of Tishri, when the Lord will come again at the end, to the close of the world's history, that he looked upon Sarah, and then she became pregnant, and on the 15th of Nisan is when the Isaac was born. So interesting that that's also, associated to the Passover festival, the unleavened bread.
Yeah, it is interesting. So I guess to answer the question earlier, to perhaps reconcile it all, is that God has always, we see when we get into the Torah that he clearly says that this will be the beginning of the year for you, and it's the month of Passover, as if that's a change, but perhaps it's always been sort of a dual reckoning.
Right. Yeah.
Where okay, we understand that as far as the Moedim, the appointed times season that we're commanded to keep forever,
yes.
that starts in the spring, but that there was this understanding that sort of humanity, life, and life after the garden even has start in the 7th month.
Yes, on the 1st of Tishrei, yes.
Maybe that's, I guess that's probably the only way that I can reconcile it, is to say that, because it has always been, I've always been curious as to why, Jews know their Torah,
right.
So why do they still worldwide do this whole, Rosh Hashanah thing,
right,
year, when clearly their Torah says, but maybe there's sort of just this dual reckoning, dual understanding. I'm sure somebody probably wrote about this in some kind of commentary somewhere. I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, I'm not either, and so it would be interesting to, if somebody that is knows a rabbi in Jerusalem, if they could tell us the context of why Rosh Hashanah is celebrated on the 1st of Tishrei, and if it has any association to Adam being banished from paradise on that day, and also that this is the day that they don't recognize Christ as Messiah, so but he will return.
Actually, we say return.
Well, some, yeah.
We say return. I think they actually still believe they're waiting for the Messiah.
Right. Yeah.
For them it would be the first
time. Right. Mm-hmm.
To come. That's, and also Yom Teruah is the day no man knows the day or the hour. Because that's the whole issue with sighting the moon, and when can you see it or not? You don't know when you're going to see it, and it's also known as the hidden day. Like there's all different idioms that I ran into when I was looking into that whole thing. People in the chat room are wondering, okay, then is Yeshua's birthday on September 11th? Well, it was that year. The problem is when you overlay the Hebrew calendar with the Gregorian calendar, it slides.
Changes. Yeah,
it changes. So
every year.
Yeah, Tishrei 1 won't always fall. Sometimes it does, but it won't always fall on September 11.
Right.
So I kind of do both. Like, I recognize that we are on the Gregorian calendar, and that if it wasn't in service at that time, but when we back off our Gregorian calendar to that date, that we see that that's Tishrei 1. So I celebrate his birthday on Tishrei 1, Feast of Trumpets, but I tend to make some comments on September 11th too, just to get people going on Facebook, happy birthday, Jesus, right on. It's the most wonderful time of the
year. Right on.
This is kind of people going a little bit, but but I would say I officially recognize his birthday as Trumpets, Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, and kind of jokingly, yet in honor of the calendar that we are all stuck with right now, also recognize it on September 11th, but I don't recognize it on December 25th.
Right. Yes. That's pagan.
Yeah. That has nothing to do with it. And this is what I'm trying to get across to some people, because I posted something about the Chosen, and the actor that plays Jesus. I really like him. At first I didn't, it took me a little bit to get used to him, but certainly by episode 3, I just, wow. I mean, this guy just knocks it out of the park. And I saw a interview that Dallas Jenkins did with the actor that plays him. And I posted that on my Facebook page. So if you haven't seen it, you want to check it out. It's really good, just listening to them talk. And I forgot where I was going with that. Oh, my God. Oh, well.
You're talking about his birthday, and Christmas being pagan.
Oh. Yeah. And so, Dave Murphy, bless his heart. Of course, these other people, Jesus was black. I don't care what color he was. Look, this is a TV series that's out, and they got a white Jesus. If they had a black one, I wouldn't care. It doesn't bother me.
Right.
Either way, I think there's reasonable arguments both ways. I don't care if he was plaid with pink polka dots. That doesn't matter to me. My point was the actor is bringing the appropriate emotions to it. But, like Dave, he's so stuck on the Jesus that's anti-Torah. And I keep trying to tell him, look, dude, I agree with you. Zeitgeist was true. If you watch the Zeitgeist movie, and Eric Dubay, too. Eric Dubay did the whole anti-Jesus video. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, sadly, they're right. But that Jesus isn't Yeshua.
Right.
There is the Hebrew Yeshua of the tribe of Judah, who never disobeyed his father, who always kept the Torah perfectly, and then there's the counterfeit that has become known by the pseudonym Jesus, through transliteration, that nobody's ever even heard the word Jesus till less than 400 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that word was transliterated from Yeshua. But not only was the word transliterated into this Jesus word, there, along with that version of him, is the Catholic version. That when they started, blending all, the Bible with paganism and making synchronicity and stuff. Hey, let's just do. He's just another dying and resurrecting sun god who was born on December 25th, and all of the tradition and ritual that tends to surround the Jesus who looks like a surfer dude is false. But that's the one that everybody wants to attack. And I'm like, well, I agree with you. You're right. That guy is a fraud. He is a counterfeit. He is everything. The guy that, says it's okay to eat pork,
Uh-huh.
He doesn't say that, but what people twist him to, everything that's anti-Torah in that guy,
mm-hmm.
it's false. But the Hebrew who went by the name of Yeshua or Yahushua or the long form version of it, Yah is salvation of the tribe of Judah, who Torah perfectly. That's an entirely different person, than what we are presented with today in modern Christianity and church.
Right. Yeah, the one that fulfilled the Levitical feast days of his father.
Perfectly.
Exactly.
So speaking of, not so much feast day. Well, yeah, I guess you could say the Levitical feast days is, we get these Moedim, appointed times, laid out for us, Leviticus 23. But there's evidence that they were doing these things in the pre-flood world. And they were doing before the time of Moses, that, Abraham, if you look at the timing of various events, including the flood, they land on these significant days. And so something you were reading, it sounded like, and maybe I don't know if I heard it right or not, that the altar that Abel had presented his sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the one that Noah had rebuilt after the flood.
So then that would presuppose that he, after they got off the ark, he somehow figured out topographically where they were and went back to, or either that or the ark landed. That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, that's right.
If Yahuwah just said, okay, the ark's going to float around for a while and I'm going to float it and land it right here.
Yes, exactly.
And it would be a familiar place in that regard. Even after the flood, there would have been something that would have had to have been familiar to him for that to be possible.
Right. Yeah, and I do believe that is what occurred, because I wouldn't think that Noah would have to go wandering around a great distance in order to find the altar, but that I think that, oh wow, here's the altar that Adam had built.
Yeah.
Let me just fix it up and I'll offer sacrifice upon it.
Well, I'm having just sort of a theatrical vision of that right now. Because when I think of the whole world being flooded, and it says in the Genesis account that the waters assuaged, and I remember looking that up a long time ago, and it's basically like the waters were coming and going. So it was this sort of idea of sloshing. water like a washing machine, and which explains what we now call the geologic column, the various layers of rock strata being laid down as a result of all of that. So, and when you consider the fountains of the great deep being broken up, the windows of heaven, opening, and we saw from the Book of Enoch that, these were massive torrents of water coming through physical openings in a physical structure known as the firmament,
right,
filling up the enclosure that, the ground would have been seriously, the whole reason we have fossils all over the world, and we have, even fossilized sea life on top of mountains, is because the whole world was covered in a flood. Mike Heiser, people want to say, it was a localized flood. Like, really?
Yeah, how do you explain the fossils of whales on top of mountains and, sea life and creatures? If it's localized, it doesn't make any sense.
So in this sort of cinematic vision that I have when you're talking is in imagining all of that, everything being thoroughly buried, both in mud as well as water. And that's how you end up with fossils. That's how you can have fossilized soft tissue in the first place. Then when the ark in the water's assuaging, maybe as the water's coming and going, it was removing some of the sediment to reveal the altar.
Right.
So that when the ark landed, Noah's going, hey, check that out.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. And then it also that when Adam was cast down, that they initially came and lived upon a mountain somewhere, and so that if he built the altar there, and we know that Noah landed on top of a mountain as well, that if there's some connection in that regard. And then also it says in the Targum, when you get to the time of Abraham and Isaac, that Abraham also offered Isaac upon the same altar that Noah rebuilt after the flood. Yeah, and so all of that is connected as well.
Well, okay, so then that would mean that after they got off the ark in the mountains of Ararat, they would have made their way back to the land of Canaan area, because Mount Moriah and the whole Abraham.
Right. Yes, Mount Moriah. Mm-hmm.
You'd have to be, he'd have to be in the land we now call Israel.
Right.
So he must have made some kind of trek then, in order to do that. In order for that to work out.
Right.
If that's the case.
Right. Yeah. If that is, and I do believe that there is a text, it's called the Kitab al-Magali, the Book of Rolls from the Ante-Nicene Fathers, that it speaks about when Adam was cast out of paradise, that it was to Mount Moriah that he went. And so that would link up to the whole thing of Abraham. And so, yeah, it would have to be a journey, but who knows?
So what are your thoughts on the final resting place of Noah's Ark? Do you subscribe to the Ron Wyatt idea, or are you of the opinion of Mount Ararat, Greater Ararat?
Well, yeah, it does say Ararat within the scriptures, but if, as far as the discoveries of Ron Wyatt, which I do believe that he was blessed to really discover a lot of things that give credence to the Bible, and that the Jonathan Gray, he also went there to confirm his findings and the discoveries that he made. And so there seems to be something, without a doubt, to what he had located, and then all of the ballast stones or the anchors that were dropped off, and the huge stones. Size of those, and also to the names of the towns that came up, and the connections to the children, and also to the wife of Noah, and that there was said to be there a gravesite for the wife of Noah, and that somehow somebody had dug up the bones, and so they exhumed the body and to protect the bones or something of that nature. And Jonathan Gray, in a show that I did with him, he said that the bones of Noah's wife measured out to be like 14 feet tall. So I thought that was interesting as well. And they did say that, as far as, the 10 generations of Noah, leading up to that, they were of larger stature and lived longer lifespans. And so that seemed to be interesting with what he had said.
All right. Well, we'll hold on that note. We're getting ready to go to break, and we'll come back and talk some more, and then get into the Jasher account.
Sounds good.
The seeker of lost paradise may seem a fool to those who have never sought the other worlds. Christ told us in Revelation to remember from whence thou art fallen, and do the first works. What many people don't realize about the fall of humanity is that Adam and Eve were initially bright-natured, and that they were placed into the garden of God to dress intended, and that being deceived and tempted and eating from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that in that moment that you touch thereof you shall die, that they come under the authority of death in those moments, and since their fall have been banished from the place of the immortals. This concept becomes very clear in the work of the forgotten Edenic books of Adam and Eve. And as we study and read into this material, this knowledge will come to light, and it will help you to understand that being restored to our bright nature, our first estate through Christ, that the reason he had to take on embodiment and enter into mortal flesh form was in order to not only redeem the ancestors of Adam, the children of light, but also to rectify us and to restore us to our first estate in this manner, defeating death and bringing forth salvation with the promise of the cross.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project for the second hour of the broadcast. Man, as usual, time is flying by.
So
wow,
crazy.
So, so right before the break, we were discussing the possibility that the pre-flood patriarchs were much taller than man is today. And I could buy that. I can believe that. It seems like sort of the common number that I hear thrown around is about 14 feet tall. Is that what you've heard as sort of the common number?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think from that Adam was much taller, but that as we go from him, that by the time of Noah, and certainly the testimony from Jonathan Gray and Ron Wyatt, according to the bones of supposedly Noah's wife being that size, that seems to, attest to her being about 14 feet. And so, yeah, it would make sense to me. Because definitely, living almost 1,000 years and being of larger stature, I would assume that, because God does say that he's going to reduce the lifespan and the stature. And in the Book of Enoch, he says even for the giants that their lifespan would be reduced to 500 years. And so I do think there was a big shift after the flood. And we even see that, Shem, by the time of Shem, he lived 600 years. And then by the time of Abraham, the
200.
longevities, 175. So.
Yeah, we're in the 200, and then by the time we get to Moses, it's capping out at 120.
120, yeah.
So I've talked about this. We've talked about this on a number of shows before, but the tomb of Abel is in Damascus, in the hills of Damascus. Really interesting place. And if you just do a Google search for the tomb of Abel, I think it's about 14 feet long.
That's very interesting. Wow.
Yeah, I've got it up on the screen right now. But I mean, you could just do a Google search, tomb of Abel, Damascus, and you'll see it. And just by way of those who are paying attention, it's a little bit of a seed in Seed, because I've got a sequence in the TV series Seed directly related to this that I've written into the story for one of the main characters. Regarding the whole what happened in Genesis 3 scenario, serpent seed, with the Nephilim, we know that when angels mate with humans, you get really big giants, like really big, 300 L's. Dr. A. Nyland says 300 L's equals 300 cubits, which equals 450 feet. So, which incidentally, we can't conceive of that, but the Greeks had no problem with that. I mean,
with the Titans.
And I mean, even in the movies, like I think it was Wrath of the Titans, and also one of the Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief type movies, they in both cases they're dealing with the resurrection of Kronos, and they depict him, as a 400-footer, So, I mean, the ancients had no problem believing that,
conceiving of that, yeah.
Whether people today do or not. But then the question comes up, okay, well, then was Cain a giant? And we recently just had a really cool flat Earth meetup at Chris Pontius's house,
Cool.
In his workshop this past Sunday. And I think her name is Desi. Forgive me if I get it wrong, but she was a woman there and pulled me aside and was talking about that whole issue, serpent seed. And she's like, I think I understand. I don't believe that Cain was a giant, and I think I know why. And I said, oh, okay. Go for it. Let me know. And she just recently posted a video on it. Now, there's much in her video that I would disagree with, but the premise that she has as far as why she thinks Cain was not a giant, other than perhaps equal to, the 14-footers or whatever the other patriarchs may have been, was she believes that the interaction that took place there, we don't know how long it took for the light suit nature to disappear. I mean, you might assume that take a bite and instantly poof was gone, but perhaps it was gradual. Perhaps it began to diminish. And she was saying that if the copulation took place before that process was complete, then the conceived Cain would have changed at the same time as Eve changed. So as her body was changing from the light suit body to the flesh body that we have now, if she was if the act took place during that process of change, then the baby inside, at the moment of conception, would have gone through the same transformation, and so he would have been born without. She called it a genetic glitch. That when angel mates with woman, there's a genetic glitch that causes gigantism, and I've tried to tell people this is not a complicated thing. Like we think giant, we think angel mates with human, and there's this supernatural aspect to it. I don't think it's that complicated, honestly. When you look into the Liger, this is what changed everything for me. I listened to this. I forget her name now. This woman did a TED Talk on epigenetics and how epigenetic markers work. And I was looking into the whole issue of epigenetics and how all that works. At the same time, I became aware of the Ligers. And I think it's liger.com. Let me see if I can look that up while I'm talking here. Liger.com was the looks like I can't get there now. Liger. Anyway, it's giving me a warning that it may not be a secure site. So I'm going to go away from there.
Yeah.
But at the time when I did look at it, it was describing how Ligers happen. Like, okay, it's the blending of a lion and a tiger, which it is possible for that to happen. I guess it doesn't typically normally happen in nature. Like naturally they wouldn't normally be hanging out with each other to do that, I guess.
Right.
Actually, I can pull it up in my PowerPoint here. For those watching, this was the original homepage for the Liger website. And I mean, these things are huge. It's interesting. It says meet the tigers. They have Hercules, Zeus, Sinbad, and Vulcan. So with the exception of Sinbad, they're all named after Nephilim. I don't recall Sinbad being a Nephilim, but maybe he was a demigod or some sort. But anyway, all the other ones are named after Nephilim. And what they're saying is that the growth inhibitor gene is in the male tiger and in the female lion. But when you have a male lion and a female tiger, there's no growth inhibitor gene. So a tigon is a male tiger mating with a female lion, and the tigon, has different features and colors that resemble the two, but they get to the size of a normal lion or a tiger. But the Liger with the male lion and the female tiger, there's no growth inhibitor gene there. So in other words, there's a genetic code in you and I that stopped us growing at whatever age we were when we stopped growing. So I stopped growing at about 5'10.5" at roughly 16 years of age. That gene, that code kicked on and said, boop, that's it. That's where you stop growing. Well, all you have to do is turn that gene off or remove it. And guess what you get? You get a giant.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
So the Liger, it will just keep growing until it dies because there's no code. The code has either been switched off or it's non-existent because of the way the mating took place.
Wow.
Such that this creature just keeps on growing.
That's very interesting.
So, for me, that demystified the whole thing. It's like, okay, like this is actual real science, verifiable, observable, repeatable science that just, for me, totally demystified the issue of gigantism.
Oh, that makes total sense.
With
regard to all that, yeah.
And why also the post-flood giants didn't get as big, because they're not living as long. I mean, if you're living 500 years without a gene inhibitor,
they're not growing that long.
Growing, yeah. So if the post-flood giants are dying, between 70 and on the high side 500. Well, if you think of the Anakim, right? And the early Amorites, size of cedar trees, and I always ask the question, what size cedar trees are we talking about? Because a modest cedar tree today gets to about 30 feet tall, but biblical cedars that we hear about, like the cedars of Lebanon, got 150
yes.
tall.
Right.
So, these things are massively huge. But when and I drew up a timeline chart, I love my timeline charts,
right,
showing the house of Abraham and the house of Arba and how they parallel with each other. And so Arba was probably pretty massively huge. He begets Anak, and Anak has the Anakim, right? Actually, Anak, I think, had 4 sons who had the Anakim. So you almost have an Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and offspring parallel there. And so, but if you follow the chronology of who's living how long, I mean, Abraham, like you said, he's at 200. And then by the time you get to Jacob, and people are starting to live lesser and lesser until you get to Moses to 120, which is pretty much where we're capped out today, even to this day. But David says, Psalm 90 verse 10, generations 70 years, 80 up by strength. So if you make it past on borrowed time, so that being the case, it's easy to understand how the Arbaites, if you want to call them that, and even the Anakim, could have been still massively huge, but progressively smaller because they're not living as long.
Right.
And my contention is, because people will be like, well, how do giants mate with women, like normal women? And we see in the various mythologies that the Olympians were mating with Olympians, but they were also mating with human mortals. And the Titans were mating with other Titans, and Titans with Olympians. And so, there's clearly this interbreeding of these gods and demigods and men of renown and so forth. And my contention is, if they grow at a normal pace, then they're still of mating size, mating appropriate size, probably well into their 20s, maybe even 30s.
Yeah, window of opportunity.
Yeah. That they would be of without getting too crude here, but they would be of an appropriate size that would fit a normal woman. Let's put it that way. Right. For a period of time, anyway, that could extend at least into the 20s, if not maybe even the 30s.
Right. And I do remember that in some manuscript that it speaks about how, when they get older and then they are giants, then they turn to each other in homosexuality, because there was nothing else. Yeah.
Although I do believe that there were probably female giants as well.
Yeah, initially, right.
But granted, their pickings would have been slim, I'd imagine.
Right. According to the Book of Og, anyways.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put the picture back on the screen of the Liger. They got. One of them, there's this woman sitting on like a hunter stand, and one of the tigers, ligers, I should say, is rising up, and you see the chunk of meat that she's going to feed him. The chunk of meat is about maybe half the size of her head, so it's a good chunk of meat. But to him, the chunk of meat is like the size of his eyeball.
Oh my gosh!
You're like, how much food do you have to feed a creature of that size to maintain its healthy metabolism? That would be the problem, is if these things just keep growing, then their body still has a need for sustenance to sustain, what's the basal metabolic rate thing? It's based on height and weight and all that, for the amount of calories you need to take. It's easy to understand why the land of Canaan frequently found itself in a famine, because it says the land devours itself. Well, yeah.
Right. Yes.
Which probably caused them to have to genetically modify the food, why you might have had very large grapes, for instance.
Yes. Yeah, that liger is huge. Wow.
Dude.
It's like twice as tall as that guy.
Massive.
Yeah.
It's an incredible, awe-inspiring thing to see. But it helps you understand, too, how we could have had, saber-toothed tigers and, all kinds of stuff, before.
Right.
And some of the people were asking in the chat room, do I think the animals, if all flesh was corrupted, were the animals that came on board corrupted? I tend to think, yeah, they probably were. To what degree, I don't know. I think that they were still good enough to be considered of their kind. Put it that way. That's not to say that there couldn't have been some other kind of corruption that was involved there, that maybe caused them to be carnivorous, or, caused, the snake venom to be poisonous, or, things like that may have caused, some kind of change, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. And also in the Targum and also the Legends of the Jews, or maybe it's the Perkti Rabbi Eleazar, that it speaks of how the angels were the ones that led the animals to the ark. And so...
they're selected, maybe.
Yeah, and so maybe, God selected the purest, and just like, Noah himself being pure in his generations.
Yeah, there's another slide that I'll put up on the screen here from the same presentation. Interesting observation, put it that way, where I ask, who made it and who didn't? Well, when we see in Genesis 6:20, of the fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee to keep them alive. Genesis 6:20. Genesis 7:13 and 14. In the selfsame day, Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them into the ark, they and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. What curious phrase is missing when it comes to the humans?
Yeah, true.
Everything else has the phrase after it, after his
kind. Yeah.
We don't see that with the humans.
No, that's interesting.
I mean, it's it's anecdotal, but still. And then we see what gets destroyed in Genesis 7:20 and 22. 15 cubits upwards did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered, and all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle and of beast and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land died. What curious phrase is missing from everything that got wiped out?
Right.
After their kind. Now,
after their kind, right.
We in Genesis 6:12 is where we see that earth and all flesh had become corrupted, but I believe the exception to that when it comes to the humans is in the previous verses, where it says Noah was found pure in his
generations, right?
Righteous in his generations, pure in his generations. The word's tamim, genetically pure. So, and we've talked about this before. If Noah's pure, genetically pure, and his wife is the daughter of Enoch, she's pure. I know we have a difference of opinion perhaps on where Ham comes from, but I'm of the opinion that the males were pure. The females, that's another issue. I do find it interesting that of all the creatures that are on the ark, it's the humans that don't have the phrase after his kind.
Yeah, that is very interesting.
There. Yeah. Wow, time is flying by. We got like 8 minutes left.
That's so crazy, yeah.
So maybe we can banter a little bit for the next 8 minutes, because I don't think I'll have enough time to read Jasher in that 8 minutes.
Right.
Come back after it, but
I'll share one passage really quick that ties into something that you said, and I think this will be interesting as well. It's from the Legends of the Jews. It says, while the descendants of Cain resembled their father in his sinfulness and depravity, the descendants of Seth led a pious and well-regulated life, and the difference between the conduct of the 2 stocks was reflected in their habitations. The family of Seth was settled upon the mountains in the vicinity of Paradise, while the family of Cain resided in the field of Damascus, the spot whereon Abel was slain by Cain.
What text was that from?
Legends of the Jews.
Yeah, see?
Yeah, the field of Damascus.
Yeah, and if you actually look that up, there's a like this shrine on this hill, and I think it's the longest. I could be mistaken, but I think I read somewhere it's the longest stairway in the world. It's like this.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard about that. I think my son told me about that actually.
It has like a turquoise colored railing, but I mean it's this long, really crazy long stairway. And I have one of my characters is we kind of open the scene with him running, and these Arabs are shooting after him, and he's got something in a satchel, and he's running feverishly running away from them down those steps. But so that's interesting. That's right there in the Legends of the Jews. Huh?
Yeah, Yeah, I thought you'd find that interesting.
So, that does, when we think in terms of end times about Damascus, which is the longest,
yes.
I understand it, the longest surviving city.
Yeah, populated, inhabited.
Is still continuously inhabited.
Yes,
it's going to be a ruinous heap.
Right, yeah. And that's, something that nobody could have even imagined, really. But it's prophetically found in Scripture, and certainly we see a fulfillment of that, because it is destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see that, and it's kind of sick. When I was in the pre-trib camp, I remember like people who are really in the pre-trib camp and that have these eschatology type of shows and ministries and stuff like that. It's almost like sadistic that they're watching for the destruction of Damascus.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, there's some kind of terrorist act or some kind of bombing or something happens, and see, it's almost like the sadistic expectation and almost like a hope in a sick way.
Mm-hmm.
Looking for, and I always had a problem with that. I'm like, okay, for your little happy rapture to happen, that means a whole lot.
Right, yeah.
And you're like getting excited that people are being massacred. It's just they'll never admit to that, but
yeah, it doesn't sit right at all.
When you take a step back and just look at it objectively, that's what's happening.
Right.
Somebody was pointing out about in regard to the animals possibly being corrupted, about now you have clean and unclean. And I'm trying to think if there would have been. I mean, we clearly see that there is the command, and this everybody thinks 2 and 2 by 2, but not of clean. You got a lot more than 2.
Yeah, 7 by 7.
Now, do you understand it to be 7 animals or 7 pairs?
7 pairs.
7 pairs. We have 14 of clean.
Mm-hmm.
That's
because why would you have 7? It would be odd.
One. Well, my thought, the possibility of it being 7 with an odd one is
just
one
in case.
One for sacrifice.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, off the ark.
Mm-hmm.
The others would be 2 by 2, and that poor remaining oddball one, I guess, would be sacrificed. But are you aware of any reference to clean versus unclean prior to Genesis 6? In the Genesis 6 narrative?
No, not really. Other than as far as the dietary, what are considered.
They were vegetarian for the most part.
Yeah. No, I mean after like what we see in the Pentateuch. But no, not before. And yeah, they were vegetarian before.
So
this time.
So then I wonder if. Pigs are really bizarre, and I've read a number of ancient texts that almost make it sound like they may have been a human
hybrid,
like a boar, like a wild boar blended with a human ends up.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of strange similarities between pigs.
Right.
And
right.
I mean, even today they'll use pig organs for human transplant.
For human transplants, right?
And
pig blood.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's really bizarre, and that's a really strange subject. But yeah, I do think that there's some weird connection somewhere to all of that.
Well, I mean, that would help. I mean, other than the fact that that they are garbage eaters, and they retain all that stuff, and when you eat it, you're the host of garbage that you are eating when you eat pork.
Right.
I mean, it's really scary. Actually, we did an experiment once because we had read about it, where you cook pork, you cook it as if you're going to eat it. So you prepare it the way you would as if you're going to eat it, and then pour I think Coca-Cola,
yes, and it brings the worms out.
Start seeing the worms come out. First of all, that makes you think, oh man, you were about to eat that pork with all that, and then you think, what is it about Coke that's making these
right? Yeah.
Coke either,
Yeah, so weird. So very weird.
I remember we did it once. We did that test, and we're like, oh Man.
Yeah, disgusting.
So, I mean, it is disgusting in and of itself, just like that. I mean, when you think of, pork is basically the same as shrimp or lobsters, in the
bottom feeders. They
bottom,
don't sweat.
Yeah. But when you add to that the possibility that there could be actually a human component
to that, yeah, cannibalism, and
perhaps going back to Genesis 6, Joshua 4:18's Jubilees 4, that becomes all the and when you think about the maniac of Gadara and the legion and the flock of pigs there,
right, yeah,
man,
yeah, definitely strange.
And why that is an abomination. I mean, in the Book of Maccabees, I think it's First Maccabees chapter 4, the act of offering the pig, not just because it's unclean, but perhaps because there may be human part of it.
Right.
I don't know. But they actually called the act of sacrificing the pig in the temple the abomination of desolation.
Right.
So, man, and like Sheila said, if bringing a pig into the stone temple was the abomination of desolation, what do you think it means when you bring a pig into the temple of the Holy Spirit, which is our body?
Right, our bodies. Yeah, exactly.
On that note, we'll go to break and we'll talk some more. Maybe get Josh.
All right.
Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us every other Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Sacred Word Revealed
comes to Atlanta, Georgia
on September 11th to the 13th, 2020.
Purpose to reveal end time mysteries.
To prepare the final generation,
we must don the full armor of God.
Featuring Zen Garcia,
Dr. Joy Pugh,
Rob Skiba,
Gary Wayne,
Yana Ben Noon,
Stephen Benoon,
Dr. Stephen Pigeon,
Justin Garcia,
Laurel Austin,
Nathan Reynolds. Buy your tickets now at sacredwordrevealed.com.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and right before the break, we were talking about pigs and the possibility that they could have been genetically engineered by blending perhaps a boar or something like that with a human. And something to think about, man. I mean, if they called, like we were saying right before the break, in First Maccabees, I think it's chapter 4, when they brought a pig into the stone temple, that was considered the abomination of desolation. And like Sheila said, she's like, well, I mean, if that's the way it was in the stone temple, what's it like when we put it in our body? Mm-hmm. You know, our body's supposed to be the temple of the Holy Spirit. And then there's something else interesting to consider. Let me see if I can put this up on the screen. Have you heard of EnviroPig?
No.
Yeah, do a Google for EnviroPig plus mouse. And they basically, an EnviroPig is created from a conventional Yorkshire pig by pronuclear embryo microinjection of the Escherichia, something like that. Anyway, they blend a pig with a mouse to create a less toxic pig. So it's an EnviroPig. It's a less toxic pig, but they did it blending a pig with a mouse. Now, here's where it gets really...
That's crazy.
Is if you look up Isaiah 66:17, Isaiah 66:17 says, let me pull this up here. It's talking, this is end times here. This is Isaiah 66, the same passage where we have, Isaiah 66:8, can a nation be born in a day? Yep. They that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the gardens behind one tree in the midst, eating swine's flesh and the abomination and the mouse shall be together, saith the Lord.
That is crazy.
Like, whoa, eating the swine's flesh and the mouse. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, is that just a coinkadink? I don't know.
That is pretty crazy. I did look up one passage that talks about the unclean and not clean animals. I'll just read that really quick before you go into Jasher. Okay. This is from the Perkti Rabbi Eliezer. It says that Rabbi Takanan said that whilst yet the flood had not come, the unclean animals were more numerous than the clean animals. But when the waters of the flood came, and the Holy One, blessed be He, wished to increase the clean and to diminish the unclean animals, He called to Noah and said to him, take to thee into the ark of all clean beasts 7 and 7, the male and his female, and of the unclean beasts 2 and 2, the male and his female, as it is said, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee 7 and 7, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean, 2 and 2, the male and his female. Last passage here. Noah said to the Holy One, Sovereign of all the worlds, have I then the strength to collect them unto me to the ark? The angels appointed over each kind went down and gathered them, and with them all their food unto him to the ark. They came to him of their own accord, as it is said, and they came unto Noah into the ark. They came by themselves, and they brought them to Noah, is it not written here? And they came unto Noah into the ark. And I'll just add one final thing from the Targum. It says, of the fowl after its kind, and of all the cattle after its kind, and of every reptile of the earth after its kind, 2 of every sort shall enter to thee by the hand of the angel, who will take and cause them to enter to thee to be preserved.
Nice. Yeah, I think actually Joshua addresses some interesting stuff here about the animals in this chapter. So I'll jump over to Joshua chapter 6. At that time, after the death of Methuselah, the Lord said to Noah, Go thou with thy household into the ark. Behold, I will gather to thee all the animals of the earth, the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the air, and they shall all come and surround the ark. And thou shalt go and seat thyself by the doors of the ark, and all the beasts, the animals, and the fowls shall assemble and place themselves before thee. And such of them as shall come and crouch before thee shalt thou take and deliver into the hands of thy sons, who shall bring them to the ark. And all that will stand before thee thou shalt leave. And the Lord brought this about on the next day. The animals, beasts, and fowls came in great multitudes and surrounded the ark. And Noah went and seated himself by the door of the ark. And of all flesh that crouched before him he brought into the ark, and all that stood before him he left upon earth. And a lioness came with her 2 whelps. male and female, and the three crouched before Noah, and the two whelps rose up against the lioness and smote her and made her flee from her place, and she went away. And they returned to their places and crouched upon the earth before Noah. And the lioness ran away and stood in the place of the lions. And Noah saw this and wondered greatly, and he rose and took the two whelps and brought them into the ark. And Noah brought into the ark from all living creatures that were upon the earth, so that there was none left but that which Noah brought into the ark. 2 and 2 came to Noah into the ark, but from the clean animals and clean fowls he brought 7 couples. Okay, so 7 couples. So we got 14 there, as he commanded, as God had commanded him. And all the animals and beasts and fowls were still there, and they surrounded the ark at every place, and the rain had not descended until 7 days after. And on that day the Lord caused the whole earth to shake, and the sun darkened, and the foundations of the earth raged, and the whole earth was moved violently, and the lightning flashed, and the thunder roared, and all the fountains of the earth were broken up, such as was not known to the inhabitants before. And God did this mighty act in order to terrify the sons of men, that there might be no more evil upon earth. And still the sons of men would not return from their evil ways, and they increased the anger of the Lord at that time, and did not even direct their hearts to all of this. And at the end of 7 days, in the 600th year of Noah's life, the waters of the flood were upon the earth, and all the fountains of the deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And Noah and his household and all the living creatures that were with him came into the ark on account of the waters of the flood, and the Lord shut him in. And all the sons of men that were left upon the earth became exhausted through evil on account of the rain, for the waters were coming more violently upon the earth, and the animals and beasts were still surrounding the ark. And the sons of men assembled together, about 700,000 men and women, and they came unto Noah to the ark. And they called to Noah, saying, Open for us, that we may come to thee in the ark, and wherefore shall we die? And Noah with a loud voice answered them from the ark, saying, Have you not all rebelled against the Lord, and said that he does not exist? And therefore the Lord brought upon you this evil, to destroy and cut you off from the face of the earth. Is not this the thing that I spoke to you of 120 years back, and you would not hearken to the voice of the Lord? And now do you desire to live upon earth? And they said to Noah, We are ready to return to the Lord, only open for us that we may live and not die. And Noah answered them, saying, Behold, now that you see the trouble of your souls, you wish to return to the Lord. Why did you not return during these 120 years, which the Lord granted you as the determined period? But now you come and tell me this on account of the troubles of your souls. Now also the Lord will not listen to you, neither will he give ear to you on this day, so that you will not succeed in your wishes. And the sons of men approached in order to break into the ark, to come in on account of the rain, for they could not bear the rain upon them. And the Lord sent all the beasts and animals that stood around the ark, and the beasts overpowered them and drove them from that place. And every man went his way, and they again scattered themselves upon the face of the earth. And the rain was still descending upon the earth, and it descended 40 days and 40 nights. And the waters prevailed greatly upon the earth, and all flesh that was upon the earth or in the waters died, whether men, animals, beasts, creeping things, or birds of the air. And there only remained Noah and those that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed, and they greatly increased upon the earth. And they lifted up the ark, and it was raised from the earth. And the ark floated upon the face of the waters, and it was tossed upon the waters, so that all the living creatures within were turned about like pottage in a cauldron. And great anxiety seized all the living creatures that were in the ark, and the ark was like to be broken. And all the living creatures that were in the ark were terrified, and the lions roared, and the oxen lowed, and the wolves howled, and every living creature in the ark spoke and lamented in its own language, so that their voices reached to a great distance. And Noah and his sons cried and wept in their troubles. They were greatly afraid that they had reached the gates of death. And Noah prayed unto the Lord, and cried unto him on account of this. And he said, O Lord, help us, for we have no strength to bear this evil that has encompassed us. For the waves of the waters have surrounded us. Mischievous torrents have terrified us. The snares of death have come before us. Answer us, O Lord, answer us. Lift up thy countenance toward us, and be gracious to us. Redeem us and deliver us. And the Lord hearkened to the voice of Noah, and the Lord remembered him. And a wind passed over the earth, and the waters were still, and the ark rested. And the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained, and the waters decreased in those days, and the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. And Noah then opened the windows of the ark, and Noah still called out to the Lord at that time, and he said, O Lord, who didst form the earth and the heavens and all that are therein, bring forth our souls from this confinement and from the prison wherein thou hast placed us, for I am much wearied with sighing. And the Lord hearkened to the voice of Noah and said to him, When thou shalt have completed a full year, thou shalt then go forth. And at the revolution of the year, when a full year was completed to Noah's dwelling in the ark, the waters were dried from off the earth, and Noah put off the covering of the ark. At that time, on the 27th day of the second month, the earth was dry. But Noah and his sons and those that were with him did not go out from the ark until the Lord told them. And the day came that the Lord told them to go out, and they all went from the ark. And they went and returned every one to his way and to his place. And Noah and his sons dwelt in the land that God had told them. And they served the Lord all their days. And the Lord blessed Noah and his sons on their going out from the ark. And he said to them, Be fruitful and fill all the earth, become strong and increase abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein. Man, that had to have been one terrifying, scary, horrific. We always just read the story of Noah's Ark, and we see the little cartoon picture of an ark with the giraffe's head sticking out,
and the rainbow.
But I mean, between the terror that was going on outside with all the animals that were being destroyed outside, and the humans, the 700,000 people, gathering finally, hey, remember that crazy guy who was talking about flood? Let's go to him now, right? And he's like, too late. You had 120 years.
Right. Yeah, and in the Colburn Bible, it speaks of this story, and Noah is called Hanok, Hanok, and in the story in that particular text, they think he's even crazier because he's living on top of a mountain, and he starts to build the ark on this high mountain, and they think, what is he doing? There's no water around here. But God had told him in a vision that the waters would come to him. And that's indeed what had occurred. And so, they were thinking he was fully crazy building this boat on top of this mountain with no water around.
Yeah. So. Going back to the whole issue of the Mount Ararat versus the Ron Wyatt thing, I got to say, it's the Drogue stones and the not so much the ark itself, but all the other stuff that they use as confirming potential confirming witness to that being the site that I do find very intriguing about the area that Wyatt talks about. However, that shape of the boat is more like almost like a canoe looking kind of shape to it, rounded, like rather than the rectangular box that the scriptures seem to describe. And there are other people that have done ground penetrating radar and find what looks to be ribs of wood.
Rivets, yeah.
Rivets and ribs and stuff. And other people have said, it's just as likely that could have been an ancient fortress, because if you look at the topography there, that would be an ideal place to set up a fortress. And that it could just be the remains of wooden fortress. And so I don't know what to believe, because there's also a lot of very intriguing imagery regarding the mountain of Ararat that we call Ararat today. And Marco Polo called it Ararat because when he came through that area, the natives said, oh, yeah, that's where the ark is.
Ah, interesting.
And so he was the one that named Mount Ararat because of the people who lived there were aware that there was a boat up there. And, I think it was during World War II, I believe it was a bomber plane or something was flying at high altitude, and they spotted it. And that's what started a big fervor on it. And then later supposed satellite imagery. Yes, I do believe that there are satellites. People say, well, how can you believe in satellites? Look, I believe that if you can get high enough, you can orbit stuff above the circle of the Earth, just as you can, just like the sun and moon are orbiting above us. So I don't have a problem believing that there could be technology orbiting up there. At any rate, something at high altitude took pictures of that area, and apparently there was a long, well-known legends of there being a boat up there, and people have allegedly gone up there, and at some point it broke in half, and part of it slid down, and there's a part that's higher up, and astronaut Jim Irwin spent the rest of his career after Apollo going back and forth up there. So I don't know. I don't know which one to believe. I think maybe the Drogue stones. I don't know how far. I never thought to figure out how far the Ron Wyatt site is from the other Mount Ararat site. So I'd be interested to see if it's not very far. Then all of the other stuff that they found, including the body, supposedly that was buried there, and some of the other stone artifacts and things like that, because the Drogue stones would have kept the ark stabilized. There's these big, huge stones that had like a eye hole carved into the top of it that they could have, like ballast or what have you. And I subscribe to the model. I don't know if I've seen different models of the ark itself that would show that the interior of the center of the ark may have been hollowed out to make sort of like almost like a bathysphere deal, such that the water could go up and down inside of like a tube. So if you imagine the center of the ark having, I don't know what the width of it would be, but let's say maybe 10 feet. I'm just throwing a number out, 10 feet across and maybe 100 feet long. So you have this, and it's all walled in, so such that water could go up and down on the inside of it, which would have done a number of things. It would have stabilized the ark. It could have been also used to clean the ark out of animal stuff, and it would have created a ventilation system. So the water going in and out would have sucked air in and blown air out. So
that's very interesting.
That is a really interesting model. You can probably do Google searches on that. But I think they built that life-size ark. I forget where it is.
Yeah, Ken Ham. Yeah.
I don't know if they built it with that model in mind. It seems like somebody said that they did, that model may have that there, so you can go check it out and see the reasoning behind it. And it would have also stabilized the ark, from it. Actually, they felt like the ark was going to snap because of all the turmoil that they were experiencing, but structurally it was obviously going to be sound enough. God wouldn't have had to build it that way otherwise. But
right.
It's definitely an interesting idea. I'm intrigued by the Ron Wyatt location, but I still lean more towards the story of Mount Ararat and Marco Polo and all that.
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot about all of that, but I do remember seeing the photo of the image, supposedly of the structure up there. But again, I don't really know. Seemingly, Jonathan Gray went and confirmed Ron Wyatt's discovery, but I haven't really even examined that in great detail, even though I did an interview with him about it. But that wasn't the full focus of what we were talking about. But it's intriguing, to say the least.
I interviewed, actually, Aaron Judkins. He went on they made a documentary, Finding Noah, which that's kind of a deceptive title. They went out to go try to find Noah, but they didn't. But it is an interesting documentary, and I've spent time talking. I get to see the premiere of it.
Where did they go?
They went to the Ararat, to the traditional Ararat deal. I think it's called the Hora Gorge or something, I think is the name of it, which is like this sort of up in the mountain is this like a avalanche slide of snow that goes down into like this, almost like a canyon in the mountain. And that's the area where I believe the story goes, the half of the ark that broke has slid down into that area there. And I don't remember if that's where they were going, into that area or the upper area, but they were doing various ground penetrating radar stuff. And, people have come back with petrified wood, from up there that, had nails in it and what have you. So, yeah, there was something built at. There was something of a wooden nature at both locations. Ron Wyatt location as well as the the Mount Ararat one. And the one at Mount Ararat is more of the box structure,
the traditional, yeah.
Versus the more canoe-looking boat structure that at Ron Wyatt's. And for the Ron Wyatt one to work, it's wider, but what they say is, well, after it began to break apart, the ribs flayed out, and that's why it's of a larger dimension than the description we have in the Ark.
Okay.
I don't know. Look, I think Ron Wyatt was, like you said, blessed to see a lot of amazing things and find a lot of things. Personally, I'm not convinced of either of his Ark discoveries, the Noah's Ark or the Ark of the Covenant. He claims that nobody. I met with shortly after Ron Wyatt died. I met with Richard Reeves, who was like Ron Wyatt's right-hand guy for like many of his expeditions, and I met him at a Sukkot. And I said, okay, the story that Ron Wyatt tells of the Ark of the Covenant allegedly being underneath the cross of Golgotha where Yeshua was killed, blood supposedly, when the earthquake happened,
the Jeremiah's grotto,
and it supposedly dripped down onto the Ark. And I was like, man, that's a fascinating story. And he goes, all I can tell you is Ron fervently believed what he said, but I have found no evidence of it. And he's been there many times following in Ron's footsteps. I mean, he was his right-hand guy, and he's and I was going to go on a team. I didn't end up being able to do it, but he was recruiting people to go with him on an expedition out there looking for it.
Wow.
So I remain very skeptical of that story. There's been no evidence that anybody can corroborate his story about taking the blood, supposedly him supposedly encountering it, getting a sample of the blood, taking it to be tested. It's a fascinating, intriguing, wild, awesome story, but nobody can vet it. So, I don't know. So I remain skeptical of both of Ron's Ark discoveries, but Richard Reeves also had I believe Ron Wyatt did find the location of Sodom and Gomorrah or confirm it. And real Mount Sinai and the altar where they had the golden calf, and there's so many other things that he did that right on target. And I actually got samples of the I don't even know what I did with that since we moved, but I had samples of brimstone from Sodom.
Oh wow!
And it's fascinating stuff, man. I mean, it's this chalky kind of stuff, but you can put it like on a metal spoon and light it up, and man, that stuff burns real hot.
Wow, that's so crazy.
And kind of a funny story. My parents are both, Bible scholars and teach like college level Bible school stuff. And so when I got this, I sent some of it as sort of show and tell for my parents to take to their Bible class, and I put a couple of it, a little bit of it in a Ziploc bag and a copy of his book and a note that explained all of it. And Mom just saw a Ziploc bag with what she thought was donuts in it. She's like, "Oh, Sheila must have made some donuts." She took it out and then plopped it in her mouth. And she's like, "Oh, no. What the heck is this? That's nasty." And then she reads a note that this is a remnant of Sodom and Gomorrah. And she's like, "Oh, no, I just put something in my mouth. Sodom and Gomorrah, that's just nasty." She had taken a bite out of it. She's opening the card as she's thinking she's grabbing a powdered donut.
That is so crazy.
But yeah. So yeah, we got 2 minutes before the end of the broadcast. Probably can't go a whole lot deeper, but any final thoughts on what we read from Jasher there with the animals?
Oh yeah, I think that story is intriguing, and I love the Book of Jasher and the additional the insight that it provides on all of the different stories that you can find paralleled in the biblical account. And that's why I find what we are doing in this particular Genesis Revisited, looking at all these parallel accounts, I think it's going to be greatly beneficial for people, and that it'll give them the ancient sources to actually go and check out for themselves as well.
Yeah, the thing that stood out to me, and I actually made a comment on, wrote a commentary on this in my Genesis extra biblical textbook, verse 11, where it's talking about, in that day the Lord caused the whole earth to shake first, and the sun darkened, like he gave a big thump on the earth. Now, at that time, I believe the earth was a globe, so I went into speculation about maybe a comet, because the prevailing view at the time was the firmament was a canopy that surrounded the earth, and that maybe penetrated it and hit perhaps in the area of the Yucatan Peninsula, maybe, and that's what caused the earth to shake first, and then the rain to come down. But haven't looked at this revisited with a biblical cosmological worldview, so kind of got to rethink that whole deal. But we're out of time, can't do that, so we'll pick up on your show next week.
All right, brother.
As always, great show, Zen. Thanks so much for joining me here this evening. And everybody
pleasure.
In the chat room, thank you so much. We'll see you back next week on the Revolutionary Radio Project. And on Zen.
Be blessed, all. Good night.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.